So let's think about today as we go through all these different presentations is whose role is it? Whose responsibility is it? And how can we work together? Okay? So I had a bunch of questions in the beginning I was going to walk through. Let's skip over that and let's get into our presentations now and get into the discussion. So the first one up is I want to introduce John Morgan. John is a powerhouse of knowledge and wisdom here, and we as a city are just absolutely blessed to have him. John?
Wow. Thank you, Mark. And good morning, everybody. Okay, so my task this morning is to kind of tee up some of the facts about what we have here in Delray Beach in the way of public facilities. And it's a lot of times, as we live here, we just want to turn on the tap, the water comes out, you take a shower, the water goes away, you expect the roads to be smooth, and the lights to come on and go off when they're supposed to. So, but it does take a lot to manage all of these public facilities that we have. And I love this first graphic. We developed this last year to talk with the commission when we did goal setting. And this kind of puts it into perspective of all of the things that are going on in Delray Beach that you don't really think about. We've got a well field for our water supply system, 30 wells spread around town that we pump to bring the water to the water plant to make it available to our residents. And we actually treat about 25 million gallons a day of water to bring to the people. Where does that go when we're done with it? We actually share a sewage plant. We call it a reclamation plant with the city of Boynton Beach. And at that plant, which is out on Congress, right at the edge of town, between Boynton and Delray, we treat that water to a quality that's good enough to use it for irrigation. It's actually very close to drinking water. One of the reasons we do that is historically in Delray, we took that water and we sent it to the ocean. So we actually have a big pipe that's right off Atlantic Avenue that goes out into the ocean. And that's how we used to dispose of our waste. We can't do that anymore. We're actually under a federal mandate to stop doing that. And we have, as a city, and I'm really proud of what the city has done over the years for water reclamation and reuse, because they got ahead of the curve and started putting these purple pipes in the ground for irrigation early on. So we're well along the way. I think right now we're already reusing about 3 million gallons a day, and we've got another 2 million to go, and we're expanding the system. So we're about to finish up on the island and bring that water to the interior residential neighborhoods and commercial neighborhoods. Other things about our public facilities, we've got about 1 million square feet of buildings that we take care of here at the city. So, and that goes from, City Hall to the facility where I am out at Environmental Services to the parks, and then even the little pump stations and whatnot, whatever we have around town. Streets, about 150 miles of streets, although streets, depends on how wide they are, and that triggers how much work we have to do, because a 4-lane highway, of course, is much more complicated than a 2-lane or a one-way. And I guess a factoid about our streets in Delray is about 48% of them currently do not meet the standard that we would like for our streets. So we have a very ambitious program to bring all of those streets up to standards, and that's part of our capital plan for the next 10 to 15 years. Some other things, 2,600 fire hydrants, 22,000 water meters. One of the things we've done with our water meters just recently is everything is now digital. So we don't have to have people go out and read water meters. We can do that with telemetry. That makes things a lot more efficient, and we can actually tell someone, we know when they're watering their lawn and when they're not watering their lawn. It's pretty amazing the technology that's available to us now. Over 40 parks, Mark will like this. This is the number he wants to increase, 12,542 trees, but I know we would like more. Storm drainage pump stations, you don't really even see those, but when it rains hard in some places, pumps come on to help keep the neighborhoods dry. 650 parking spaces and 2 parking garages, which is a lot to care for. And some people say we need more, some people will say we need less. So parking is a huge issue for our public facilities. Well, where else will I leave you here? So I think we'll move on from this. We've got to take care of the fleet, so we consider those public facilities, which includes the police cars, the fire trucks, all the heavy equipment. So what's our goal in public facilities? So really, it's all about being cost effective and meeting the level of service. So with all of these things that we take care of, we want to make sure that we're getting it right, and then more importantly, that it's sustainable. So one of the things I've had the privilege of doing in my time here is to try to make the city more energy efficient, convert lighting from traditional lighting to LED, bring in air conditioning systems when we replace them that are a higher SEER and much more energy efficient, and to lead by example for our businesses and for our visitors and our residents. So here's where we're at. When it comes to water and stormwater, I'm comfortable saying that we're doing well. So we've got the checkbox there. We're meeting expectations. Could we do better? Yeah, we can always do better. Where we really are needing to improve our level of service is in our city facilities with our street sidewalks and public rights of way. And then how we're managing traffic, street signs, pavement. And if you've been around town, a lot of times there's potholes. It's hard to see parking spaces. Sometimes there's not lines in the streets. So all of those areas are areas that need attention. What are our emerging issues? And this is where I'm going to leave you. Our water plant runs really well, and we produce a great product. But I told you about those 30 wells earlier. They're in superficial aquifer, and that aquifer is now restricted. So in a few years, our permit is going to expire, and we're going to have to find a new source of water. Huge capital expenditure and an important part of where we're going with providing water for the city. So will we go deeper? Will we go west? We don't know. Those are the kinds of feasibility studies and analysis that we're doing now. Will we need reverse osmosis? Will we need desalination? Will we need membrane, other types of membrane, like nanofiltration? All those things are issues that we're wrestling with right now. They won't be cheap, but they're going to be necessary for long-term sustainability. The expansion of the reclaimed water system. I think we'll take all of the water that they can produce for us out of that water plant. So putting these purple pipes in the ground and making them available to public rights of way and to neighborhoods, that's a great way to stretch that drinking water supply, because the more people you can put on the purple pipes for irrigation, the less drinking water people would use for their yards, and that just makes it available for growth. And then last but not least is complete our vulnerability assessments and develop adaptation strategies. Our buildings aren't necessarily built to hurricane codes. Some of them aren't built to the new building code because the building code changes. So updating our public facilities and making them not only ready for today but ready for the future is a really important part of our challenge over the next few years. And that's the end of my presentation.
Thanks, John. So talk about the gift and talent we have here and as a city with our staff. I say following John, but equal in knowledge and experience is Dr. Anna Pushkin-Shevlin. Again, as a city, we're blessed to have such talent here. And Anna really brings a level of expertise in an area that's very technical. So it's great to have her here. Please open up to hear Anna give a presentation on sustainability and resilience.
Mark, where's the clicker? The clicker? This one? Well, thank you so much. Do we really need this?
Yeah.
Okay, we really do. Morning, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out this morning. For those that don't know me, I'm Anna Pushkin-Shevlin. I'm the Sustainability Officer in the city. And I've often been asked, what is the Sustainability Officer? And I'm fond to say that I'm the Queen of Green. But more technically, for those that aren't familiar with the term, sustainability is an old term that's gotten kind of worn out. It used to be kind of novel and hip, and now everybody uses it for almost everything. So when you go back to the textbook definition, it's development that meets the needs of our generation without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. What does that mean exactly? Well, it's the quality of not harming the environment or using up all the resources so that in the future, people can have the same quality of life that we're enjoying. I like to describe it as a bunch of different initiatives. It's the way we live or the choices we make in all kinds of things. It's waste reduction and recycling. It's choosing to go with alternative energy. It's using energy more efficiently or using less of it, conserving water resources, like John just pointed out. It's making the choice to go with organic agriculture rather than commercial mass production. It's really, really about land development, which is why it's very important that this presentation is paired with the future land use plan. It's also about conserving the habitat and the birds and the bees and the environment for all little creatures and the whole ecosystem. And I like to think of it also in a social term. It's economics. It's about keeping it local and having economic development happen locally, bringing products from local sources, using them locally, and recycling them. Another term that's also emerging as the newer hip term, sort of replacing sustainability, is resiliency. That's even more amorphous a term than sustainability. Some people say it's a verb. It's the act of sharing the capacities to manage and adapt reactive to a threat or a hazard. Some people say it's the absence of an adverse effect. It's being able to maintain stable function in the case that things are upside down. Again, I like to think of it as a bunch of qualities that a city or a community has. One is having factual knowledge. You can't be resilient if you don't know what's going on and what the threat is. You need training, you need to understand things. It's about being prepared, having emergency management, not just at the city level, at your household level. It's about being able to communicate the risk effectively. If everyone thinks the sky is falling down, you overreact. You spend resources you don't need to. If you can really communicate what to do, when to do it, you can be more efficient. It's about, and this one's important, extensive community networks. If you go into the literature on resiliency, communities that are well knit together, that have strong civic institutions, are able to bounce back. They're able to help your neighbor. They're able to get institutions that are impacted back on their feet when a crisis happens. It's also about public involvement. It's you guys sitting here on a Saturday morning, supporting each other, empowering the citizens to become part of its governance, which leads me to governance. It's the ability of our leaders to trust the public and the public to trust what we're doing in our buildings, what's going on in City Hall, that what we're doing, how we're leading, the investments we're making, we're transparent, you trust us, we're making the right choices, and you, in return, come to these meetings on a Saturday morning and give us your input, frankly, without fear. Economics, you can't beat that. Wealthy communities do better in a crisis than poor communities. So we have to make sure that we can bring those kind of resources and make both our economy and our institutions strong. And it's also a mental outlook, and this one I added recently. If you think that it's going to get better, it will. If you have a community that says, we're always in the hole and we're never going to climb out, it's really hard to climb out. So it's having that confidence in the institutions, having that community feeling that really helps communities be resilient. And while I'm sitting here proudly saying that we're now going to have a sustainability and resiliency element in the comp plan, and that's kind of novel, more importantly, those principles, both the sustainability principles and resiliency principles, have to be in each of the elements of the land use plan. It has to be integrated throughout, so it has to be both vertical and horizontal. So where are we today? Sustainability and renewable energy. What have we done? I'm proud to say that, a couple of weeks ago, we passed our PACE ordinance. We are now looking at having some solar trees from FPL. We won in cooperation with Lantana, West Palm Beach, and the county. We're getting a solar smart advisor for 6 months from the Department of Energy. But there's more to do, a lot more. So where should we go from here? And this is the transition. What do we have? But here, today, when we think about the comprehensive plan, where do we go? We need to do a greenhouse gas inventory. Maybe we need to do a solar canopy on our parking garages. We know, and we've been asked, please, more electric charging infrastructure, right? How about a solar cooperative? That's a new concept that's spreading throughout the state. I'd like to organize a solar cooperative for our residents. How about electric or biodiesel trucks and fleet? Where are our priorities? Please tell us, the planning staff and me, where do you want our city to go? Conservation. What have we done? Yay! We passed a new urban ag ordinance just Tuesday. It's really exciting. And we now have community gardens. Actually, we have 6 of them going in our city. We have a tree protection ordinance that was tightened. We recently planted, thanks to Mark, an orchard, a community orchard, one of very few in the United States. These are all really good things, but there's more to do. And I think these numbers are really important. If you look at the tree canopy coverage, we're lacking in our tree canopy coverage. Part of it is because we have a lot of palm trees, but part of it is because we have a lot of vacant land that could be reforested. Maybe we need to also restore some of the land or purchase more conservation land. How about a balloon ordinance? I've been asked about this. Would you support that? We don't want the turtles and the sea animals to be ingesting balloons and dying, but would you, as a public, support a balloon ordinance that says, hey, your little kid's birthday party, you can't fly those balloons close to the coast? Those are kinds of decisions that are complicated. On one hand, as an environmentalist, yeah. On the other hand, as a private citizen, get out of my business, Local growing cooperatives. There's a lot we could do here. Green building development. We have 9 LEEDs buildings in the city. Should we have more? We have an ordinance that says that new buildings in our CBD, in our central business district, if they're over 40,000 square feet, have to be LEEDs. Is that a good standard? Should we lower the standard? How do we encourage more? So, what do we aspire to? One, these are my things, but we want to hear from you. We need to make solar permitting really easy. Otherwise, we're not encouraging it. We want to, and I would like to see all RFPs that come out of the city require a sustainability component. Why should somebody be developing public land and not hold the highest standard of building? How about tightening that ordinance or increasing the number of green buildings in our city by 10%? Do we need to do an energy reporting program? You tell me. These are some of my ideas, but I'm waiting to hear from you. Recycling. This is an interesting one. We have not done as much as we could in terms of recycling. Here are the recycling numbers. You can see that the percentage of recycling has gone down. The amount of garbage has gone down. That's good. But as a percentage, the amount of recycling versus garbage has also gone down in the past few years. You can see it better here. See how that orange bar is becoming a smaller percentage of the blue. So where do we go? How do we strengthen that? Well, one thing we're trying to move forward is a textile recycling program. 80% of all the clothes get thrown into the waste stream. Only 20% end up in Goodwill or in a recycling format or reuse. I'd like to see recycling bins downtown. You can't say you're a green city and walk down the street and have somebody throw a styrofoam cup or a water bottle into the garbage on Atlantic Avenue. That's embarrassing. How about having a requirement that all events have recycling cans? Have you been out to Delray Affair? All the commingles there? Maybe we should do that. The toughest one, I think, is commercial recycling. This is not easy, and it can be a little expensive. Do we have the political will to require it in an ordinance? We need to hear from you. This is something some cities do, and some just don't want to put that burden on the private sector. I do a lot of this. I feel like a good part of my job is this outreach piece. I try to do outreach on every topic. Sea turtles, we did one about lighting. Earth Day is just a general one. Be green, everyone, look at all the green stuff. We're doing something called the Daylight Hour. It's for energy awareness. We do something about the king tides, about sea level rise. Educating the public, getting more people interested in this topic is really important, because when it comes to supporting an ordinance, if you don't understand why it's important, you're not going to support it. So getting people to really understand this topic is a real part of my job. I try to do that on the webpage. We put on all kinds of information. If I'm missing something, I'd like to hear from you. We can add it. We're also doing this at the grade level. I'm working with FAU's Green Schools program to bring green schools education into every elementary school in our city. Because if you teach them really, really young, when they turn 18 and they go to the ballot box, they will vote for a penny tax to buy land. If you don't teach that when you're young, then they won't. So you have to start really young. If we're going to require all of this of our citizens, we better do it in-house. I think that we've done some really good things in our city. Under John Morgan's leadership, we became a silver designation for Florida Green Building Code. Maybe we should try to move to gold? We now do employee training. Every new employee that comes through the city gets 15 minutes of my whole gung-ho green lesson. I teach everybody about the proper way to recycle, what goes in which can. We do this daylight campaign. We're trying to do recycling reform. We've started in our building. I'm trying to get it out to everybody else. But there's a lot more. I am flabbergasted that our city's purchasing policy, even though it's green, they do not buy recycled paper. Most of the paper sitting on our shelves has 0 recycled content. It costs a little bit more, about 9% more, but shouldn't we, as a green city, have paper that has 30% recycled content? I mean, that's kind of elementary. We'd like to move things to digital. We don't want to print out a travel report with 40 pages that needs 6 signatures and then gets stored where? In a file that gets stored in an air-conditioned building? For what? Can't we move some of this to digital? These are changes and they take a while. I'd like to see our fleet move to diesel or electric. And of course, this greenhouse gas inventory as a benchmark. If we had that, we would be able to measure where we are today and where we're going. Now to resiliency, before I run out of my 15 minutes. Resiliency is, again, that amorphous topic. And typically in Florida, we've always been really, really worried about that one in the middle, the hurricanes. And it's all been about hurricanes. But now it's more than just hurricanes. It's really climate change, because climate change impacts everything, including the hurricanes. It's flooding from precipitation. It's flooding from groundwater rising. It's storm surge that's going to get more intense as the hurricanes get more intense because the water temperatures in the ocean are warmer. It's also about other types of disasters. We have a train line that runs through town. We could have a derailment. We could have terrorism at one of our events. And as we've heard this past week, there's cyber attacks. What happens when the network goes down? Nobody does anything. You can't function without the network. How do we become resilient as a city and as a community to all the different kinds of threats, both man-made and natural ones? So my beef is always the climate change issue. If you haven't seen that chart before, it should become burned in the back of your mind. We are expecting between 9 and 12 inches of sea level rise between now and 2060. Doesn't sound like a lot, but if you spread it out everywhere, it'll go everywhere. Water goes where it wants. So if you can sort of focus in on this map right here, if we had 2 feet of sea level rise, every property that you see highlighted there would be submerged. More importantly, that blurry number is about $341 million of taxable value to our city. All of that is at risk. But it's not just sea level rise. Sea level rise is a component of a bigger issue. And one time I was asked to diagram this in terms of public health. And I think that's a good paradigm. Community health, ultimately, it's life and death, right? So you have increases in greenhouse gases and rising temperatures. So you have poor air quality, you have stronger heat waves that last longer, you have either drought, like we're sort of experiencing now, or a deluge of rain, and then where do we put it all? And then we have the sea level rise. And together, if you put these things together, you start to see a series of related impacts. If you have hot weather and you have a lot of rain, then the fertilizer comes out of the ground, gets into our canal system. Then it gets hot, and what happens when you have fertilizer and warm water that moves slowly? You get algae blooms. Then it goes out to the ocean, and we get algae on the ocean. That impacts our tourism. You can start to see the cascading effect. If you have rain and you don't have a good roof, your house gets flooded. You dry it out, but the sheetrock on the walls gets moldy. Then you have children in the house and they develop asthma. Then the cost of treating that child goes up. All of these impacts are interrelated. So how do we deal with that? Well, there's this adaptation and mitigation, and there's the crossover between both. I like to say that the mitigation is all the sustainability stuff I talked to you about before, reducing the greenhouse gases that are at the root of this problem. The adaptation is the resiliency. What do we do to prevent the disaster from happening? Well, we're doing a lot, and we can do more. We can do pumps to pump the water out. We can do the one-way valves that prevent the flooding. We can keep our dunes and our beaches healthy because they prevent the storm surge. We can do mangrove preservation to prevent the flooding, higher seawalls. We can do alternatives, new technology like living shorelines. We can also do a lot in terms of land use, which is why it's great that I'm being followed up by the future land use element. So we need to look at our LDRs, our local development regulations. Do we build it up? We have a 35-foot or 60-foot height limit. If you want people to raise their buildings and they have to lose a story, they're not going to do it. Can we create an exception that you can raise your building 2 feet to get out of the flood zone and not hit that ceiling? How about moving it back? How about transfer of development rights? Maybe we don't want to build on those areas that are flood prone. Maybe the cost of the insurance is going to get so high we won't be able to. Where do we steer that development? This is the question we ask you. Do we encourage it westward? How tall? Where? These are the kind of questions that are to be answered in this comprehensive plan. Because if you set the goals in the plan, we can develop the tools to make it happen. But it has to be in the plan. So maybe one of the strategies is to buy more land. Going back to Mark's framing question, what is the role of government here? If somebody has a house that's in a flood zone, is it our problem, or should they just absorb the cost? Hey, you bought a house in the flood zone. Good luck. Do we buy them out? Is that public money well spent? Do we acquire it for habitat preservation? Questions. I like to ask you questions because I want you to think about all of these things. Finally, there's the ability to prepare and ensure. We have emergency management. It's really important that we strengthen those capacities to respond because insurance is not going to cut it. There just isn't enough money in the flood insurance program for all of the assets at risk. And the program's going to go broke. Well, maybe we self-insure as a city. We could create an insurance pool for our own residents. Some cities have done that. It's pretty progressive, but it's not out of it. It's not like not out of it. So what I'm asking today is that you envision a really different future. I like the slide where the houses are over the water. Not that we're necessarily going to do that, but think about how progressive that is. How about the picture in China? Look what they're doing in terms of their tall buildings. They're turning them green. They're actually green buildings, literally. This picture, it's hard to see, has a monorail going over a very congested city. I think one of our staff, Clayton, who works at ESD, once said, we should have one of those ski lifts from Tri-Rail right to downtown. Well, there it is. That's Bogota, Colombia. how do we create, how do the new technologies change things? Can we grow vertically? Are we going to have drones? Are we going to regulate that? Let your imaginations go for a moment, because now is the opportunity to really make a difference. And with that, I thank you for your time. Yeah. LED? Oh, a LEED? Okay, a LEED is, there is a group of architects. It's leading in energy excellence and design, right? Leading energy excellence and design. Efficiency? It's a certification of professionals in the design world and planners that create a set of criteria where a building can get a certain number of points and be awarded a category. So if you build a building that's super green, depending on a variety of different categories, you can become silver or gold or platinum. It's not the only certification of its kind. There are competing organizations. That's the one that just got like Band-Aid. Not all bandages are Band-Aid, but we call them Band-Aids. Yes? Right. It's a volunteer. And, to give fair audience to all of them, there's Florida Green Building Group, Florida Green Building Council Coalition. I get the acronyms mixed up. There's a new one called Green Globes. There are a lot of these that are emerging. They each have different criteria. Some are more rigorous, some are less rigorous. LEEDs happens to be one of the ones that's most well known. So we tend to use that to mean all of them, but there are a lot of different types of accreditation you can get.
I just want to say that it's important, something you missed. The greenest building is the existing building that you use. And I'd like to see you incorporate that into your presentations and what you're thinking of. And I want everybody to remember that, because that also folds into Delray's village idea, historic preservation, so it isn't, you're based on LEED, which is led by architects who want to have work and get paid for it and build buildings. I know that one. But you can try to reuse existing buildings, which we've done a lot. All you have to do is look across the street and see the Historical Society has 3 little cottages that they had relocated there, and it's now become a wonderful, vibrant center.
You're right. You're absolutely right. Every time that we reuse something, we're not using up more resources. Every time we reuse it or repurpose it, we're saving resources. So you're absolutely right. And with that, I'll turn it over. Thank you.
Thanks, Anna. Okay, we have one last presentation, and our Planning and Zoning Director, Tim Stillings, is going to come up. And we saved this for last for a reason, because we've, over the last 4 meetings, been talking about transportation and housing and economic development and environmental issues and social issues. And all of these really combine to develop the last 2 elements. One we haven't really spent a lot of time on, and that is our capital improvement program, which is kind of the funding arm, the action arm of this. But really the summary of the whole comprehensive plan comes down to the future land use. What are we doing? How are we developing? How are we using our land? So with that, Tim?
Thanks, Mark. Mark's absolutely right. The future land use element and culminating into the future land use plan really does bring together the 4 themes that we've talked about throughout these workshops and presentations. Defines where we live and how we live. It defines where we're going to work in our commercial areas. It establishes where we're going to play in our parks and recreation and open space. And it also defines how we're going to grow in establishing what are those intensities within each one of those different land uses. So the first plan was adopted in 1989, and David mentioned that the city doesn't quite look like it did in 1989. However, if you look at the land use plan, it really hasn't changed that substantially since then. What has changed is the implementation of that plan and the implementation of the different standards and goals that were established in that plan. So we really want to look at the plan going forward and how we use that to achieve the goals we want for the next 10, 20 years for the city of Delray. So the plan is made up of a variety of land uses, and you can see from the graphic on the screen, the yellow is residential, which makes up the highest percentage of land use in the city. And you'll begin to see a number of corridors, I don't know if this works, but you see along the federal highways and along Atlantic Avenue, Linton Boulevard, and even Congress, you start seeing that grouping of mixed use areas and commercial areas that defines our commercial and industrial land uses, which provides us a little bit of a balance between our residential and commercial in terms of our economic base. So as I mentioned, the percentage of land use for residential is the highest. The next highest that we have is open space at 10%, which is a pretty good percentage for a city of this size. And I know there's some who would like to see that increase, and we can look at other opportunities throughout the city where we can achieve that and where we can add different components of open space, either through pocket parks or other smaller opportunities. And then we get into the commercial making up 8%, and that's defined as strictly our commercial districts as well as our more mixed-use districts. And so one of the things you want to think about today is where are those areas within the city where we would like to see more of a mix, where there can be that integration of residential with commercial. There's been a lot of talk within the Congress Avenue corridor and the task force about having a better integration of residential within that corridor, but also trying to maintain those areas that are the community serving industrial components, where you get your car fixed, where you get your chairs reconditioned, etc. And so it's really something that we need to take a close look at. So as you talk about the future land use plan, think about really what do we see as some of the market trends? What do we think we want to accommodate with respect to development and changes in growth? Where do we think redevelopment should be focused? I know we have a number of areas within the city that we don't really think will change. Many of our neighborhoods will stay neighborhoods. So how do we effectively characterize, should be a little X right here. What do we do to preserve those communities while still allowing the city to evolve and change over time, so that when we look back in 20 years, we see that we've had an impact on that. So where are some areas where we might welcome increased building heights versus areas where we would want to maintain a certain height? I know recently within the Central Business District, we put a cap on height. We had a provision that height was limited to 48 feet, but you could go up to 60 with some special considerations by the commission. That has been capped at 54 feet, with the exception of Atlantic Avenue, which is now at 38 feet. So we have put a somewhat of a height suppression there. And so again, think about how you've seen the community grow in your time here, in your tenure, what your neighborhood looks like, and how you think we can best preserve those, and welcome the discussion and the deliberation and debate. And thank you.